Greetings, dear learners. Welcome to the official YouTube channel of SRN International School, Jaipur, Rajasthan. I am Faculty of Sociology at SRN International School. Today, in this video, I will be explaining the theories of demography from the chapter Demographic Structure of Indian Society of Grade 12. Reference has been taken from NCERT. Let us begin, students. Among the most famous theories of demography is the one associated with the English political economist, that is, Thomas Robert Malthus. Malthus' theory of population growth, outlined in his Essay of Population book that was written in 1798, was a rather pessimistic one. He argued that human populations tend to grow at a much faster rate than the rate at which the means of human subsistence, especially food, but also clothing and other agriculture-based products can grow. Therefore, humanity is condemned to live in poverty forever because the growth of agricultural production will always be overtaken by the population growth. Now, Malthusian theory of population also says that population rises in geometric progression, that is, in the manner 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, etc. Whereas, on the other hand, agricultural production can only grow in arithmetical progression, that is, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, etc. Because population growth always outstrips growth in the production of subsistence resources, the only way to increase prosperity is by controlling the growth of population. Unfortunately, humanity has only a limited ability to voluntarily reduce the growth of its population. It can be done either through preventive checks, such as postponing the marriages or practicing sexual celibacy. Malthus also believed, therefore, that positive checks to population growth in the form of famines and diseases were inevitable because they were nature's way of dealing with the imbalance between food supply and increasing population. And it used to result in disequilibrium between population and food supply. Proceeding further, students, Malthus' theory was influential for a long time, but it was also challenged by theorists who claimed that economic growth could outstrip population growth. Now here, however, the most effective refutation of his theory was provided by the historical experience of European countries. The pattern of population growth began to change in the later half of 19th century. And by the end of the first quarter of the 20th century, these changes were quite dramatic. Malthus' predictions were proved false because both food productions and standards of living continued to rise despite the rapid growth of population, my dear students. Malthus was also criticized by liberal and Marxist scholars for asserting that poverty was caused by population growth. The critics argued that problems like poverty and starvation were caused by the unequal distribution of economic resources rather than by population growth. An unjust social system allowed a wealthy and privileged minority to live in luxury while the vast majority of the people were forced to live in poverty, my dear students. Talking about the another significant theory in demography is the theory of demographic transition. This suggests that population growth is linked to overall levels of economic development and that every society follows a typical pattern of development related population growth. There are three basic phases of population growth. The first stage is that of low population growth in a society that is underdeveloped and technologically backward. Growth rates are low because both the death rate and the birth rate are very high, so that the difference between the two, or the net growth, is low. In the second stage, society is developing, technologically advancing. High birth rate and low death rate are found, leading to the high growth rate. The third and the last stage is also one of low growth in a developed society, where both death rate and the birth rate have been reduced considerably, and the difference between them is again small. Between these stages is a transitional stage of movement from a backward to an advanced stage, and this stage is characterized by very high rates of growth of population. Second stage, as we already talked about, that this is a transitional stage. This population explosion happens because death rates are brought down relatively quickly through advanced methods of disease control, public health, and better nutrition. However, it takes longer for society to adjust to change and alter its reproductive behavior, which was evolved during the period of poverty and high death rates, to suit the new situation of relative prosperity and longer lifespans. This kind of transition was effected in Western Europe during the late 19th and earlier 20th century students. More or less similar patterns are followed in the less developed countries that are struggling to reduce the birth rate in keeping with the falling mortality rate. In India too, the demographic transition is not yet complete, as the mortality rate has been reduced but the birth rate has not been brought down to the same extent. Talking about growth rate of population, it refers to the difference between the birth rate and the death rate. With this difference in zero, or in practice very small, then we say that population has stabilized or has reached the replacement level, which is the rate of growth required for new generations to replace the older ones that have died out. That was all, students. I hope you all must have understood today's talk. Thank you so much. If you find it useful, share, like, comment, and do subscribe our channel.